Yes, it's hard to build things technically, but the more important reason is you're just going to get it wrong.
Yeah, don't build something that no one's going to like, which happens all too often if you haven't got the feedback.
Our view is the happier we make the retailers, the happier our customers are, which are the suppliers. Especially in technology, as a small startup, you've got to be bang on for your hiring process.
Yeah.
The number of people you lose due to a bigger, better offer, it's an enormously competitive market. I treat hiring as a sales process. I actually used a sales CRM at one point to actually run it.
Interesting.
And it was actually born of, we weren't fast and agile enough, we were losing candidates.
If you've been called a dreamer for quitting a well-paid or stable job to start your dream business, then our next guest on the Make It Happen show has a story you won't want to miss. Adam Theobald is the founder of Australia's leading order ahead app, Hey You. The app, previously known as Beat the Queue, has processed over 20 million transactions, truly disrupting the hospitality market. He's now moved on to his next venture, Ordermentum, which is revolutionising the supply chain side of that same industry. But this didn't come without its challenges. His first business failed, and he had to sell his car to buy his wife an engagement ring when times got tough. I had a great time chatting with Adam. We cover everything from establishing company culture to what to prioritise in the early days of business and how technology and disruption go hand in hand. Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Make It Happen show. I'm here with Adam Theobald. Adam, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So you're the founder of Beat the Queue, which became Hey You. You're the founder of Ordermentum. And so both of these apps have really brought technology into the hospitality space, a space that I love dearly, but is not well known for adopting technology or new ways of doing things. So just to kick us off, how have you made that happen?
Look, through a lot of tenacity and through losing lots of hairs on the top of my head. I think it's one of those industries where you actually need to get right into it. It wasn't something where you could step without it from outside and sell different pieces in. You needed to be in a venue, seeing their problems, feeling their problems, serving customers. I think that's been one of the really important factors of getting inside the industry, not trying to do it from outside.
Yeah, well, because hospo people like and respect and know hospo people, and if you're an outsider coming in, they're going to be like, how are you going to help me with my business?
Absolutely right. I mean, I remember one of the early examples of that was turning up to sell a cafe in a suit. I came from a world where suits were a thing. I learned very quickly the way they looked at me that this is not the way to do it. But no, that's absolutely true. We needed to understand the problems and to walk in their shoes, and that was crucial.
But that is where the idea for Beat the Queue came from, wasn't it? You were spending a lot of time in cafes because you have your corporate job, and you started realising there was something going on. Can you talk me through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of two key moments that I talk about with regards to where we came up with Beat the Queue. I mean, the first was sitting in cafes. I started to notice that people were getting more impatient, right? And what was happening was we saw an enormous number of trendy cafes appear on corners, and we saw people in suits standing very impatiently, and they increasingly started looking at their watch. They increasingly started to hassle the barista, and that was a really interesting thing for me. It stood out massively as a growing impatience across society. And you talk to people out of industry, they said the same thing. The Gen Y thing was a very topical conversation at the time, and so that was the sort of macro theme. A really specific example was we're at a Jack Johnson concert, and I waited for 45 minutes for chicken burgers, and it just wasn't on.
Were you getting hangry?
I was really hangry, and I'm the guy in the group that does get hangry. But look, we waited for 45 minutes. There was a couple of funny interactions, but the real summary of it was that ultimately the venue operator lost out massively. We lost out massively. It was a loss. We had to fix it, and we're at a time when there was a lot of cool tech emerging, like tablets, like 3G data, that just started to enable it. So it was a number of things all occurred at the same time.
Yeah, and app development was really starting to be a thing. Had you had any experience developing an app beforehand, or how did you go about that process?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I was a computer science graduate, so I sort of understood the programming principles. I was terrible at it. So it was probably enough knowledge to be dangerous. I think one thing that was happening at the time was everyone was building an app. So apps became so trendy that I was selling to a cafe and they'd say to me, nope, don't want to use your, I'm going to have an app. and to be honest, the first few times I heard it, it was soul destroying because how could I compete with them and their own app? But quickly the space started to evolve and improve and really consider what an app was, what it did for you and when it made sense.
And where the power comes from. Like the power comes from the network which I'm sure you were probably trying to explain to them. But
Yeah, I mean, look, of those venues who built their own app, they spent $20,000 and they had 3 people use it. And trying to help them understand that the customer experience was to have an app for everywhere they went, that wasn't convenient.
Yeah.
Ironically, it's the same conversation we have today with suppliers in the hospitality space with Ordermentum. Is it right for them to dictate to their customers that they should order through their system, or do they want to draw on the benefits of the network effect? And that's an amazing parallel that I see every single day today.
That's a really great progression. It's like, so you're moving further into the supply chain in this one industry. The conversation you're having with the customers here, you have with the customers here, and you probably have with the customers here.
It's absolutely right. I mean, I responded to quite a big tender the other day with a really well-respected company that I love, actually, and I'm just devastated that they're considering the alternative. But I was just explaining to them, when was the last time you went to a restaurant's website or app to order with that restaurant? That is inconvenient, right?
And the game has changed significantly in the last couple of years.
And do you want to force your customer into your way of trading, or do you want to go to them? And it's a really brave, tough decision for them to make, but in almost every instance, they're better off for it.
Yeah. So it started as Beat the Queue and then became Hey You. Why the evolution? Why the change?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our ambitions with Beat the Queue became much more than coffee. We merged with a business called Posse with the great founder Rebecca Campbell in that business, and we raised a whole lot of money with Westpac's Reinventure and Exto Partners, and we were looking at where we went to next for our growth. And our growth was in lunch and other verticals. And the decision was made that we had an opportunity to rebrand, take us away from a more specific functional coffee angle into something that could be more generic. And that was the strategy.
I'd actually like to talk about the rebranding process a little bit.
Let's do it.
Because not trying to give anything away, but it might be something that we're looking at in the not too distant future. How did you go through the process, and what were some of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it was a lot of fun. We hired a great agency. We looked at a bunch of agencies, what they could bring to the process. We landed on a company called The Hallway. And look, it was really interesting. We looked through the entire customer journey, right? And it was all about the customer for us. We didn't have billboards. We didn't have big flyers, big stands. It was all about the customer's interactions. For us, because we had such a habitual customer base, what we were looking at was, how are they going to move really nicely from one brand to the other? And we got advice from Apple, we got advice from a number of sources around changing colours, changing names, when you change the store, when you change your social media accounts. The interesting thing about it was we were super deliberate. I was super scared about it.
Yeah. Were you scared that you were going to lose that brand equity that you built up?
Yeah, there was definitely that. I mean, I had a personal attachment to the brand. I was being dragged through this kicking and screaming, to be totally honest. But the truth of it was that as the further we stepped into it, what we realised was that it didn't change our trajectory for a single day. If you mapped our user numbers, our downloads, our acquisition, everything, there was not a single point of inflection around our branding. On reflection, my personal opinion is that realistically, the same reason why I wouldn't bother changing it back is the same reason why it probably wasn't needed. The reality is that brands are crucial and they need to be good, but if you've got a good one, keep it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to comment on that. It's like, if there was no material difference in your growth trajectory, up or down, then how much of an impact did it make?
It's a tough one. But look, no regrets. It was a great experience. Learned an enormous amount for it. I was actually with a partner from overseas who we did some work with in the financial space previously. And he actually said to me, Beat the Queue, Ordermentum, they're too functional. I hate your names. So everyone has an opinion on these things, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you certainly established a very good brand in Hey You. It's very well recognised here in Australia. I think it's a great brand. You transitioned from Beat the Queue into Hey You, and then that was still your primary focus for a while there. But then Ordermentum came out of that. What was the sort of transition period there, and how did you navigate through that?
Look, yeah, it's a really tough journey. So what happened was I came up with, when we were selling to venues, the venues would always say to us, hey, it's great you're doing this great thing for our customers, but what about us? We're an unloved cousin. We're the B2B partner that never gets the chance to play with the apps.
Funny enough, they probably are. A lot of them, a lot of people are related in the hospitality industry.
That's true, there's a bit of that. But look, the truth was that they felt unloved, and they explained this scenario where the suppliers dictated all the terms around their relationship. How is it that I have to get a call in the middle of service to collect my orders? How is it that I've got to manage all these paper receipts in this drawer, and they'd show me the drawer.
Yeah.
They just hated the whole thing.
I remember that drawer, having worked in cafes or restaurants, and you'd lose your order forms all the time, you'd certainly lose the receipts, and you'd forget to do the orders on time.
And the other thing we find is that someone leaves the business and then all the IP about those orders or who to order with goes as well.
Yeah.
So I decided there was something to do. I did what every entrepreneur does. I thought that I could solve it with my existing platform. So I tried to play with Beat the Queue. We built menus. It was at the facade very similar. We're talking ordering, payments, products. But ultimately, as soon as you scratch the surface, it was a very different need state. They ordered on different cycles. They had different payment terms. It was a very different requirement. So what we decided to do was to spin the business out into a new business. We hired an external agency to help build the initial MVP, who did a great job. And I was lucky enough that a really good friend of mine and the former GM of Toby's estate, Andrew Lowe, who knew the industry inside out, called me up and said, that thing you were talking about, can we talk about that? Great. And so that was the opportunity to land on one of the best in the business on the supply side of the network, and to really create a synergy of tech and supply industry.
Awesome, particularly on the spinning or getting another development company to help you do the development. Why did you do that? What were the advantages of that, and would you do that process again?
Yeah, look, it was great to develop an MVP.
Yeah.
It's I would not criticise all agencies in this way, but I think that agency can lead itself to short-term development requirements. But it's absolutely true. If your business is a product, as soon as you're funded, I think you need product in-house. That's your core capability, is iterating really quickly around the customer and ensuring that you are building for them. And it was perfect for an MVP. It was perfect for us to test what we were doing, to get feedback from the first bunch of customers. And from there, we raised money and we brought it all in-house.
Yeah, great. So that you can actually have first ownership of the IP, ownership of the direction, and you can be a bit faster.
I think speed and agility is the key. We own the IP. That's all structural and legal. But my real key there is that in those early phases, yes, you have a horizon that you think's right. It's always wrong. But ultimately, being able to really quickly iterate between the different ideas that pop up, the different feedback points that occur. I want 100 feedback points a day, not every month, right? And I think that's something you only get when it's in-house. That's my opinion.
So at this point, you're doing both? So doing Hey You and Ordermentum?
Yeah, doing both. So we kicked off the MVP. We were lucky enough to get, we thought, if I'm honest, with Ordermentum, we thought it was the friend of the small guy in the industry. And our first paying customer was actually Lion, the big alcohol company. So
starting at the bottom.
It was funny how quickly I sold out. But the truth is that ultimately it's a solution for top and the bottom. It really changed our perspective on what Ordermentum could do. But yeah, absolutely. From the start, Andrew was running Ordermentum. I was still running Hey You with Rebecca. And then the opportunity came to join Andrew and work with him in Ordermentum. And that's been now almost 4 years.
Fantastic. And so you're still, I think, the largest shareholder in Hey You.
Yeah, one of the largest independent shareholders.
Okay. Yeah. What's your involvement with that? Did you sit on the board? Did you provide direction, or are you really focused here?
I'm 100% focused on Ordermentum. It's really hard. One of the things that I've been coached on is urgency and focus. I think they're crucial for any startup, and I've really reveled in the opportunity to dive headfirst into Ordermentum. It's been a really exciting ride. The growth is amazing. I've been really happy to do that for them.
Fantastic. Where is Ordermentum today?
Yeah, so Ordermentum has 20,000 retailers around the country ordering every single month. It's representing almost 20% of the retail side of the hospitality industry today. And we've got about 250 suppliers. And so like Hey You, like a number of these startups, it's a bit of a marketplace. You've got two sides to push along at the same time.
Which side is hardest? Because one's always hardest.
Yeah, it's funny. We had our blinkers on and we were selling to suppliers. And so our model changed a lot from Hey You, because acquiring retailers is really expensive, really difficult. So with Ordermentum, we changed it. We were working on the supplier side of the network. They brought all their retailers. But I think with these businesses, it always tends to move around a little bit. More recently, we've really shifted a lot of our energy and time and team onto the retailer product. Our view is the happier we make the retailers, the happier our customers are, which are the suppliers.
Yeah.
Complicated, always moving around, but dedicated teams on both sides, and dedicated KPIs for each, which really helps.
So what's a classic use case of the platform?
What's
absolutely. The most common?
So the classic use case, in fact, half of our customers are coffee roasters. So extending from my time in cafes at Hey You, We were working with a lot of coffee roasters already because they were one of our partners to get to market. And the classic use case is I'm a roaster. I have a couple of hundred customers. It's really expensive for me to manage the orders, payments, and systems that go with the logistics of order management. Ordermentum comes in and helps manage all of that, right? Instead of phone calls, call centers, chasing payments, all that sort of rubbish, Ordermentum's a platform that is built to run that leg, which is the retailer ordering with their supplier. They can do a bunch of other things like pick and pack slips. We've just launched a great BI tool for them so they can really understand their customer base. But what we found was that this industry of coffee roasting has gone from 20 big players to roughly 2,000.
Yeah, wow.
And so they were using accounting systems and doing really clever things, but there was nothing really built for them. And so that's where we spend our time.
So you've taken what did used to be a very manual process without much systemization, certainly no technology underneath it, and built the technology to facilitate the process. Now there's obviously a lot involved in building that technology, and you've got in-house development. What kind of team do you have working on this? Yeah, how do you manage that?
So we've got almost 50 people in Ordermentum now. We've got a small team in Manila of 10, which do a lot of our customer support and back office. And then we've got a team of 20 developers in Sydney, development and product managers. We've got a really modern stack. It's a lot of fun to use the modern stuff, but it's really easy for us to recruit people because our stack is modern and they love working in it.
Oh, so that's one of your employee value propositions is we are modern, we are new, come work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two value propositions we sell ourselves on. One is the well-funded startup. We've been blessed to be well-funded from day one. I suppose the second thing is that you're working in the great tech. And I don't mean bleeding tech that's not proven, but we've just picked some really great tech that's modern and it's got real momentum and people love working in it.
So would that be one of your key bits of advice for having an Australian-based development team?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it comes down to the CTO and having a really high-quality technical founder. I think in every business, technical debt is overlooked. The ability for you to develop on platforms that are no longer trendy or that are starting to cost you money without you really knowing, it's a balance sheet that people don't look at. And a really great technical co-founder, I think, is someone who can identify not only the crazy speed, breakneck speed that you're going to run at and the crazy changes you're going to make, but can protect you from that growing technical debt. And that's what our CTO has done, John D'Agostino.
Yeah, I think there is a danger there coming from, it's so easy to just pick up a certain application or a certain bit of technology and develop on it. Like you can get something up and running really, really quickly. And then you're like, okay, that's doing part of what we want to do. And then, we could use this to do the other part. So you do, and then, we've got to stitch them together. And suddenly you've got all these different systems stitched together through APIs, and it just becomes an absolute mess. So just actually sitting back at the beginning, having someone that can say, no, this is our technical direction. This is what we're going to build on. It's compelling and it's going to attract people, hugely advantageous.
I think it goes two ways as well. I mean, all that's completely true from a technical perspective, but I think when you're designing the experiment, you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, recently we launched a new part of our product offering, which was a new revenue stream. And it took us about 3 months to establish proof of concept. And we did something crazy. We started sending PDF reports to our customers and they were horrible. I mean, it almost laughed at the idea of sending a PDF to someone. But we used this to establish, did they like the information? How could we tweak the information to be value? Did they see value? We pre-sold it to them and now we've completely digitized it. Now, our technical work on that proof of principle is zero. So the more you can do to bring out the experiment from tech, I think it's crucial.
Yeah.
Now there's different places where that's not possible, but wherever you can sort of shift that line right out of the technology, you're going to make your CTO happier.
And the key with minimum viable products is to be sending out something that you are very embarrassed about. That's the key.
100%. I mean, a lean startup, we've all heard MVP out of that, and it really did change my life and the way I thought. I mean, it was a really important book for me. And the reason, people often get the reason wrong. The reason is, yes, it's hard to build things technically, but the more important reason is you're just going to get it wrong.
Yeah, don't build something that no one's going to like, which happens all too often if you haven't got the feedback.
100%. And treat everything as an experiment. These are all things we've heard before, but I live and die by them. These are crucial for us. And you can't help but make that mistake sometimes. Every time you do, you look 3 months back, you can see it.
Yeah.
It's really important to keep that front of mind. And our whole team lives by that.
I definitely think, so we work with business owners across all different industries, and I think people who come from a more technical background are very au fait with MVPs, and they do embrace it. I think a lot of other business owners that probably have never heard of the lean startup, it is an area that they still need to work on a lot, like understanding that, we have this inherent, we don't want to put out something that's not perfect. So we unfortunately develop it way too far down the line, only to then learn later on that no one really cares. So it's an area that a lot of business owners, particularly in non-technical areas, they need to embrace it a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most practical way to surface up this MVP concept is just treating everything as an experiment. If you do that and you always look at cost benefit, you very quickly decide, where to spend your time and money. I mean, ultimately, as a startup, the number one thing you've got to do well is prioritize.
Yeah.
It's the mandate. And if you do, you can always see the ones that do it well, they're just so agile and they so quickly find where success is.
Yep.
I think that prioritization and treating everything as experiment is crucial.
Yeah, and the prioritization of what to focus on comes from your customer feedback.
Yeah,
they'll tell you every time. Great. So you've recently in Ordermentum gone through a big stage of growth.
Yes.
The business and what you're focusing on is changing.
Yes.
Can you talk us through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just gone from close to 20 to 50 people in the business. That's been through some really exciting growth. And our board and shareholders are really excited about investing to the next stage. And I think the really exciting thing about that for me was implementing new teams, new structures, and new people. Now,
are you being serious? Are you serious?
Well, it's funny. I kind of say it tongue in cheek, but there's this idea of it being exciting. I think the funny thing about for me is that as a startup, as a small little trendy startup, because we all know it's very trendy, you look at the corporate guys and say, oh, corporate, that's the other side. We will never become like that. And then quickly, the deeper you get into it, the more you realise you need some of it.
Yeah, some of those policies and procedures, dare I say it, are actually fairly useful.
Yeah, that's true. But we've got this concept of establishing something becomes business as usual and creating the right frameworks around that, not to kill feedback or change, but just to help it get nice and efficient.
Yeah.
But then you need these other parts of the business that are still completely experimental. So finding the right balance of that as you get a bit bigger has been really, really fun.
Yeah.
And I think the team's getting around the difference between the two, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, nice. It's kind of two different hats,
yeah,
different stages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the challenge and the beauty is in finding, okay, what is this stuff that works for bigger businesses that we know has some value, but we need to make our version of it, the 30-person version of it.
Yeah.
Has there been a couple of areas in the people side of your business that you think you've done that well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got some great feedback from Tim Full, probably about a year ago now, and I understand he's been on the podcast as well. I think his feedback was that he would have hired a people person earlier, so I did.
Great.
and that's been fantastic. The day one, the impact that has on someone who, invests every single moment of their time in your investment, which is people, has been fantastic.
And what kind of things do they spend most of their time on?
Look, it's funny, as you go from 20 to 50, culture is really strong and culture is embedded in everyone, but we didn't have it on the wall, we didn't have it properly defined. And the first thing Tanya did was really establish and formalise the values and our purpose and vision. Now, the really pleasing thing was when everyone was surveyed, they were all pretty close to the surface already.
Great.
But it was really good to get them on the wall and to help use that as a real pointer for every single hire going forward. So that was a really simple, probably obvious, but important and really impactful thing for us to do. But then just, I think, hiring processes. It's a cliche, but it's everything is who you hire. And I, especially in technology, as a small startup, you've got to be bang on for your hiring process.
Yeah.
The number of people you lose due to a bigger, better offer, it's an enormously competitive market. I treat hiring as a sales process. I actually used a sales CRM at one point to actually run it.
Interesting.
And it was actually born of, we weren't fast and agile enough, we were losing candidates. And that was way too expensive.
Yeah.
So the people investment on that side of the business is enormous.
How has the leadership side of your business evolved?
Yeah, so we're co-CEOs, Andrew and I, which is a lot of fun. He's a really good friend of mine, so we just have a really good fun time. All teams have pretty clear reporting lines into each, but we just have this mandate where if any one of us is there and the other isn't, we trust each other enough and empower each other to do what they need to do.
Oh, okay, because I was going to ask, how does having a co-CEO work in practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You get certain people who think it's a train wreck, and I think if there's trust, and it's an absolute strength because you get so much different perspective from different angles. In this case, it's just been enormously successful from my perspective. I remember our chairman, David Gordon, who's been absolutely fantastic for our business. When we first presented the idea to him, he was quite sceptical. I suspect we've changed him a little bit on the topic. But look, it's a lot of fun. I've never had so much fun working alongside Andrew. And I think it's a really big win.
Yeah, great. That's fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about just is there any definition of difference in roles, or it's just like, hey, whoever you find is going to have the best interests of everyone at heart?
No, so we have different functional parts of the business that report into each of us. So there is a practical line there. But the truth is that he's very capable on my side of the business, and I'm somewhat efficient on the other.
Very humble.
But the reality is it works really well. But it does come down to trust. And I've seen examples where if it's not trusting, if it's not positive, if it's not, we're going to win this together at all costs, it gets difficult. And I've experienced both sides of that.
So looking forward now, so big stage of growth, raised a bit of capital recently as well. What's ahead?
Look, we've been through this really exciting phase of tremendous growth. It was actually really funny. I mean, I remember sitting in our monthly board meetings and looking at sort of month-on-month results, and they looked okay. They were really good, but when we zoomed out a little bit, the growth looked fantastic. It's funny how your perspective changes depending on your time horizons.
Were you stuck a little bit in the weeds and weren't sitting back? Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a crucial resolution point, right? You've got to pick multiple resolutions to understand a problem.
Yeah.
But I think for us, it's really exciting to see product market fit. I mean, we're fairly comfortable that it's working well for our customers. 100 things to improve, but it's working well for our customers. The thing for us now is making things scale and really getting the crowd to do the work. One of my lessons at Hey You was I was a little bit slow to use this fantastic customer base for the growth of the business. And I mean getting them to refer their local venue and getting them to refer their friends to also use Hey You. And that's a crucial event to get cost-effective scale. I think half of our business is referred from our customers today.
Right.
So essentially, we're now formalising that. So everything we do right now is about how we can make the wheel spin faster.
So we're comfortable with the product, can always be improved, but we've nailed that for this stage, and now it's about growing the business on that.
Yep.
Marketing being a big part, sales being a big part.
Yep.
Yeah. And so where do you see the business in 1 year from now?
Look, in 1 year from now, I see us doing a lot more of what we're doing, doing it a lot better. But I think what we will see over the next year is that the business starts to get the legs that it's already showing us. We see our retailers demanding Ordermentum of their suppliers. We see the power of the retailer actually getting bigger and bigger. I mean, the bargaining power of the buyer. It's a Porter's, more corporate sort of strategy piece. But I think we're seeing more and more of that emerge at the moment. And I see this amazing sort of network emerging where we're doing all the heavy lifting. I just see us pulling ourselves out of the circle and letting this marketplace start to really scale itself up.
Wow, that'll be really exciting.
Here's hoping.
And the expansion of your reach and operations, what do you see with that?
Yeah, good question. So we're actively as a board discussing the opportunity to expand overseas at the moment. Watch this space, but it's a big and exciting proposition. Interesting one for us because our strength is really the network. So to go overseas, you've got to build a new network. And so we look at that very cautiously, and we would do that with our customers as opposed to without them. But that's the big one. I think there's a geographic bound. We've got some really exciting new features for retailers when it comes to finance solutions and things that help them trade smarter. But that's really the whole thesis for us. We're really passionate about win-wins, not a win for one side of the network, wins for both sides of our network to help the entire hospitality industry trade smarter. And that's something that we're really starting to see some evidence on, certainly through these BI tools and other features we're introducing. The market's ready for it. They want it. You can see, when you're selling something and you can just see you're not landing the point. Whereas sometimes you can see they just want it today. We're in that phase at the moment.
Well, and that is that cusp of product to market fit, and then it's just their champion bit. Excellent.
And you can put metrics around it, but everyone knows that when they've had that conversation, when they're getting someone or when they're not,
Yeah.
It's that moment where you double down and
Yeah.
you got to lead a little bit more.
Yeah.
You've got to take some risks. But yeah, we're definitely in that phase at the moment.
Very exciting stage to be. All right, we're going to start wrapping up. I've got a couple of questions here to ask you that I haven't seen, you haven't seen. Ready to get stuck into them?
Should I be nervous?
Yeah. Like Mariah, she writes some pretty mean questions. So we're going to get these done in 1 minute. Ready to make it happen?
Let's do it.
Okay. So number one, you've disrupted the hospitality market, but what other market do you think is ripe for disruption?
Big one for me is political debate and that whole sphere of debate on key issues.
Yeah, very interesting. I've seen a couple is My Vote, who are down in Victoria, who are starting to build on some blockchain technology as well. I definitely agree with you. A lot of potential there. All right, what was the highlight of your career?
I remember a really awesome moment when we were selling Hey You to, in the phase of raising funds with Westpac. And I remember going into the room and having two of the really senior execs that became really big fans selling me how fantastic the app was. And as a small little entrepreneur, you spend your life trying to get people to hear, know about you and talk to you. These guys were selling me, and that was a really cool moment.
It's like, your app is fantastic. You're like, I know.
Yeah, where have you been?
How do you take your coffee?
Interesting. I normally take a flat white, but at the moment I'm trying to be good. I'm doing some fasting, so I'm drinking long blacks.
Oh, good. Very healthy. All right. And finally, Adam, for business owners out there looking to bring on investors, what's your top piece of advice for them?
There's a really important bit of advice, which is only sell the right proposition to the right person. Selling to people with a mandate that can't invest in you will never get you money. I'll give you an example. Someone trying to raise $200,000 with a VC. It's impossible. They cannot write that check. And you consistently have this issue where you hear people spending all their time in areas which are not going to work out. Only ever put the right proposition to the right person and make sure you've done the homework to know what they can invest in.
Yep, brilliant advice. Adam Theobald, thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Best of luck.
Thanks for your time. It was great being here.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Make It Happen show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And it doesn't need to end there. We've actually gone and grabbed a whole bunch of extra resources for you. Behind the scenes footage, videos from this and all the other episodes, as well as show notes that you can grab for free. Just head along to www.the-entourage.com/podcast and you can grab all those extra resources. Thanks for tuning in, and I cannot wait to introduce you to our next guest on the next episode.